Hello, boys. This is White Pill Media, and welcome back. This week, I'm going to be talking about The Prisoner. The Prisoner is a TV show. It ran from 1967 to 1968 for 17 episodes, each one about an hour long. It is about a secret agent in the British intelligence services. He has resigned, and then he is kidnapped, and he wakes up on this mysterious island where no one has a name there. Everyone is just a number. Our main character, played by Patrick McGoohan, who I don't really know that well, except I recognized him and I looked it up. He's actually Edward Longshanks, the mean old king in Braveheart. So that was kind of cool. He's given the name number 6 there, and he is being interrogated. He's being questioned. The people running this place, known as the Village, they want to know, why did he resign? And several questions are raised, such as, who is number 1? He is number 6. The main interrogator, who swaps around from episode to episode, that's number 2. And we want to know who is number 1. Why did number 6 resign? Which side runs the Village, meaning communist kind of Russia countries, kind of like that, the Soviet Union, or is it the Western side, NATO, kind of like that? Who's running this thing, or is it a combination of both? And why do they need to know why 6 resigned? So I usually only like to discuss media. Typically, that is a really strong recommendation from me, and I thought this was going to be a very strong recommendation from me. You can actually watch the entire show on Tubi TV for free. It's all there, and you can watch it for free. So check it out if you want to. I'm going to warn people before I get into spoilers, but I'm fairly mixed on the show, where I think there's some really wonderful, great episodes, some great standalone episodes that are fantastic. Also, it's kind of like a Lost or a Battlestar Galactica, where it raises all these very interesting questions. There's a lot going on, and then ultimately it fails to deliver on answering any of them. Not even in a satisfying way, but just answering them, period. So it was a struggle for me. Also, we don't really have progression between episodes. Each episode kind of stands on its own, with number 6 on the island trying to escape, resisting number 2, and the people running the village, trying to get information out of them. And it's really, no matter what happens, nothing actually changes. Characters don't make references to past episodes, not really. We reset every episode, and that's a little frustrating. So it's this lack of progression between episodes, it's this lack of change, it's this lack of a satisfying ending, to where I'm mixed on it. But I still want to talk about it because there's definitely interesting parts. Because I had heard really good things about The Prisoner. It's this spy show. It's older TV, so I just kind of, I don't know, I've been dipping more into older stuff lately, and I've been pretty happy with that. Anyways, we're going to be talking about The Prisoner, the original show. I'm also going to be talking about this really awful, I think it was 2009 reboot that was 6 episodes long. That was god awful. It's only 6 episodes, but we'll briefly touch on that. And there are also some comics, done for The Prisoner. We'll look at those as well at the very end. But yeah, we're just gonna kind of hop right in. If you just want to go in more blind than anything, you can just go watch it on Tubi TV. I'll have a link for it below. Definitely some interesting stuff. Definitely some good stuff. I would say my favorite episodes, if you just wanted a quick viewing guide, I would go 1, 2, 5, 7, 8. 7 and 8 I think are my favorite episodes overall, but there's some that are pretty okay. I'd say the first half of the show is definitely stronger than the second half. I'm not going to go super in depth for each episode. I'm just going to kind of talk about some of the stuff I liked, what I noticed, And yeah, so from here on out, we're going to have spoilers and everything. So here we go. The first episode is just number 6. He arrives in the village. We have everything's a little weird because it is like the 60s. Like there's this weird teeter-totter room, just like how everything's kind of like the sets and all that. It's very stylistic, right? It's very stylistic, but it looks a little weird. And we have these like giant white balloons which kill people, and they're kind of like sentries. I remember this from years ago where I was just watching like Simpsons on the TV, and like they did a parody of it, and I looked it up. It's like an episode in season 12 where they did do a like parody of The Prisoner, and they actually did get Patrick McGowan to voice act in that. So I don't know why, but as soon as I started watching the show, I'm like, I've seen this before in The Simpsons. Anyway, 6 can't really like find anyone to trust here because he recognizes a man named Cobb in the hospital, but then we find out at the end that Cobb, who 6 thought had died, is actually alive, and he's in on it, and he's working with the village, and our number 2s get replaced. Our number 2s get replaced just about every episode. There's only 2, but it's Leo McKern. He comes back. He's in the second episode as number 2, and then for the final 2 parts. And then we also have Colin Gordon, who's in the episode A, B, and C, and then the General. Those are the only times they come back. And Colin Gordon, there's no reference. There's no continuity between the episodes, so there's no reference between that episode and his later episode. But with Leo McKern, there's a little, right? There's a little like, hey, I've been here before. So, second episode, we have, 6. He's still defiant. I like this little bit where he's talking with number 2, and then he's like, how do you like your tea? And he's like, it says in your file that you don't like sugar, and then he adds 3 sugar cubes just to piss him off, so they have to rewrite his file. And a woman shows up. Her name is Nadia. She's an Estonian, she's this beautiful woman. And 2 gives us some insight about like what the village is and what it can be. Like if this can be a model for world order, communism versus liberalism, democracy in the West. And this is a way to like rule the world. 6 promises to settle down to save Nadia. That's his one weakness, is a beautiful damsel in distress. She ends up forming an escape plan with 6, and they get away. I really like the little like art fair that they have where it's number 2's face on everything. It's number 2's face on everything. It's good. It's very good. And they actually do make it to London. That's what we're led to believe, that they've made it to London, and it's almost perfect. It's almost perfect. But they trip up a little bit when they ask 6 why he resigned, and he starts to figure out that he hasn't left. It's a fake office. This watch he got from a guy in Poland has the exact same time as Big Ben in England, despite the time zone difference. And it's been this really, really elaborate ruse. And someone that was there at the end to kind of make 6 trust what was going on, Fotheringay, he's going back to London. So yeah, we're led to believe that there's definitely people on both sides that are a part of this system, like Nadia representing like the Soviet Union, and Fotheringay and Cobb from episode 1 being from, British intelligence also being a part of this. But we don't know which side is exactly running it. In the third episode, they boil down 6's life to 3 people. Like there's A, B, and C, and they're trying to figure out why he resigned by going through his memories, by digging inside of them. And I almost felt there's a little pity here. I almost felt pity for this number 2 when he picks up the phone and he pleads with someone whose voice we can't hear about, because like I'm like, oh, does number 2 get killed after each failure? Is that why they always replace them? And I wasn't sure. It doesn't seem to be the case where they're always killed, but there's certainly some kind of punishment involved for them. But this was fine. Fourth episode, this is about elections, because a lot of the show is also about like the individual versus the community, that kind of like freedom and that kind of balance between that. But we have elections taking place. And I like this little exchange here where 6 calls this breakfast French, 2 counters with international, And then 6 is defined by saying French. I like it. I like whirling everything together to be globalist, to be international, to retain some sense of identity and culture. It's a nice little thing. But we have this, there's this election going on, and 6 wins the election at the end, and everyone is just silent at it. And he moves into 2's lair, and he has a nice little speech at the end where he tells people to obey him and they can be free. But this is kind of another problem where there's no continuity between episodes, because this would have been really interesting to follow this for an episode or 2 where 6 has become the new number 2, but that's all erased by the end of this episode. So it's like, whatever, nothing really happens, nothing can really change, right? But 5th episode, Schizoid Man. This was a good one. This was a real kind of mind trip where they really want 6 to doubt himself, and they bring in a guy to impersonate 6 completely. They make 6 think he's this number 12, and they have a double of him pretending to be the actual 6. And this was a nice just kind of impersonating him, like just breaking him down. I really loved this, and I loved his, he almost made it at the end, but number 2, he figures it out. There's just a few little things that trip him up. All right, 6th episode, this is something, there's this guy called the General who gives lessons, and you can supposedly get a degree in like 3 minutes. It's just supposed to be like fast knowledge, but you're not allowed, you know what I mean? Like, it can give you knowledge instantaneously. There's obviously prices to it because you don't understand like the why. You just have this knowledge. And it turns out the General is this computer thing, and 6 is able to blow it up by asking a question. The question is just why, and it's like, all right. And there was one guy who, number 12, who was actually trying to help 6, who was on the village's side, and it seems like he was legit because he is killed at the end. So it seems like he was a legit like trying to work with 6, but since he's dead and there's no continuity, it can't really go forward. 7 is one of my favorites. 7 is so good. 6 wakes up and it's like everyone is gone. Everyone is gone in the village. He is the last one there, and he starts building a raft. He starts taking photographs and like gathering evidence, and he ends up escaping at sea. He's gone for at least 18 days, and he makes his way back to England. And he goes to his old home. And he gets super emotional when he finds his woman, she's driving his car, she's living in his place. And he has this really nice, just emotional moment on the couch where he's just eating some sandwiches that she made for him. And her name is Mrs. Butterworth. But he has problems when he gets in touch with like his intelligence people, where they don't fully believe, they can't really trust him. Like, are you a double agent? Why did you resign? What's going on here? Are you gathering information right now? But, they're still willing to work with him to try to find out where the village is. And Mrs. Butterworth promises that, because 6's birthday is coming up, that she'll bake him a cake for his birthday. Turns out that 6 was at sea for 25 days. And they find out that the village is between Morocco and Spain and Portugal. And then when 6 and another guy are in a plane over the island, his cord is pulled, and then he's forced to parachute back down to the village. And everything is back to normal. And does his side run things or not? I think the British intelligence people have to know something. They have to be a part of it to some degree. And it's so good when he's back in his home on the village and Miss Butterworth comes in with a birthday cake and she's number 2. Oh my God, that was so good. One of my favorites, and it's standalone, it's standalone, and it's fantastic. So in the 8th episode, they are trying to get 6 to reveal information by having his former colleague, Dutton, call him while he's under some kind of hypnosis, but 6 ends up resisting. And then number 2 shows up, and she's this little woman, and she suggests that 6 gets a girlfriend, and he finds out that there's going to be this mysterious carnival held in the village. He makes an escape attempt, but this doesn't go well, and he finds this dead guy's body on shore, and this guy has a radio. 6 ends up finding Dutton hanging out in a cave he's been broken. He's been tortured, and he's been broken because they never push 6 too far, because they're just terrified of breaking him. So like there are limits to what they're willing to do to him, but that doesn't apply to everyone else on the island, right? They are willing to like break those people down. Dutton says that he has told his captors everything that he knows, but they think he's still holding out information, and they're going to start employing harsher methods to extract the information from him soon. And then we cut to the carnival. It's this dance. It's this costume ball. And everyone has an elaborate identity except for number 6, who's just given his own dinner jacket. There's this like mock trial that's put on to put number 6 to death because he had a radio with him. He has the radio from the beach. And he asked for Dutton to be called as a character witness. And Dutton is produced wearing a jester's costume. And he is this little mindless simpleton. He's holding this white balloon, for like a rover. And it's, oh my God, Jesus Christ. That was so harsh. And Dutton is already like barely in frame. He's already broken. 6 can't save him. It's terrible. It's terrible, and it's really good. It's really good at the same time. And 6 ends up running away a little bit, and he's like destroying this teletype machine or printer. And despite all of his rage, he can't actually break it down. 9th episode, it's like, there's like some human chess stuff. He tries to recruit people who still have a will. They still want to escape. But by the end, everyone's convinced that 6 is actually working with the village, even though he's not. And yeah, it's whatever. 10th, we have kind of our most like aggressive, brutal number 2, who's like, he physically hits number 6, and he gets a woman to commit suicide. And this makes 6 go on this revenge plan to drive number 2 insane. He like does a bunch of nonsensical stuff. Like he goes to the store, he listens to a bunch of records who are actually, they're all the same, but it seems like there's some hidden message between them. And all this is done just to drive 2 insane. At the end, when 2 has had like his mental breakdown, he says he thought that 6 was planted by XO4, like some spy name. This doesn't come up later. It's just a little bit of information that doesn't do anything. 11, we have 6 has to stop this assassination plot on number 2, because otherwise there would be a mass reprisal against the people of the village if he doesn't. And yeah, there's that. Number 12, there's something called a commission, and he's called like a rebel, a reactionary. He's disharmonious, and this is like a struggle session where, this is the individual versus community, and they're trying to make him lonely. They're trying to make him completely isolated. It seems like he's going to be given a lobotomy. They didn't go through with that. And it was just they're trying to trick him into thinking he did. And there's this little dwarf. I guess we can still use the term dwarf, in 2023. But there's this little dwarf who's just like a servant to number 2 throughout the show. And I kept thinking, like, is he number 1? Because he's always there. That's not the case, but he's always there. So I started to think maybe he's number 1 because the camera follows the little dwarf guy at the end. 13, men from the British intelligence community, they're looking for this guy, Saltzman. Turns out there's this thing where like you can transfer minds between bodies, and this happens to 6, and 6 is back in London. They list off some names like XB4, XO4, and they list off XB4 here, and they did XO4 in episode 10. So I don't know if that was implying that number 2 was a part of British intelligence or what. It doesn't come up. But basically, this mad doctor guy can switch minds in people's bodies. And 14, it's like we're in the Old West. And I think this is kind of the worst episode because since there's no continuity, since nothing can really... Well, this is not the worst episode. But there's no continuity, so it's just like, hey, we're in the Old West, right? But of course, that's not it. It's a mind game. It's like, it's a whatever, I don't really want to watch because I know nothing ultimately matters. Nothing can change. 15 episode. This is like a bunch of kind of nonsensical stuff. It feels like Sherlock Holmes, and it is supposed to feel like Sherlock Holmes. And it turns out that this is just Six telling stories to kids. And number two's plot was that maybe he dropped his guard if he was telling stories to children, and then he might reveal some small detail that they could use against him. This was kind of awful. 16. So, 2 from episode 2 is back. This is Leo McKern. He says there's no other way. He says that they need degree absolute. And what this is, they are breaking number 6 down. They are making him into a child, and they have a week to get it out of him. They are breaking him down and building him up. But by the end of it, it's this really dangerous procedure because they're just locked in this room together. And 6 has actually overcome the doctor, and 2 dies at the end. And he tells the control room guy to take him to number 1. So this is the only bridge, the only real continuity we have between episodes, where 17 starts with 6 being taken to a strange chamber with a judge, with masked men, with placards. It's like communist, nationalist, and a few others. They have these little placards. 6 is no longer to be a number since he has passed the ultimate test. He is an individual. He cannot be broken down by the village. And turns out that number 1 is like this robot thing in the corner. We had 4 main questions when we started this show. Who is number 1? Why did number 6 resign? What side runs the village? Why do they need to know why he resigned? None of these questions are answered at the end. It's very unsatisfying. There's no progression between episodes. Some standalones are fantastic, but they have no connection between each other. And ultimately, the plot kind of goes nowhere. And this ending is so surreal. I think I read that Patrick McGowan was not assaulted on the street, but people harassed him for a long time on the street because of this show. And the ending, we have a guy who was a village goon, and number 2, they are sort of on trial, and the kid, he sings the bone song, this bone is connected to that bone, and that bone is connected to this bone. I'm not making that up. You can look it up on Tubi TV, episode 17. I'm not making that up. It's really surreal, and it's kind of insane. It's kind of really insane. And 6 is given the option to lead the village now, or he can go free. And even though they give him this choice, they won't let 6 actually speak. He doesn't actually meet number 1, or number 1 is supposed to be himself, or it's supposed to be metaphysical and you are your greatest warden. I don't fucking know. But he and number 48 and 2, they go on this killing spree, even though they've never killed in the show before. Not really, but in this one, they just have machine guns and they're just mowing people down. And yeah, it just feels like a complete cop-out, they couldn't write something satisfying where we don't get to see number 1, we don't have any other answers. And I don't know. I don't know if I would have been happy if a James Bond's Blofeld. I think that would have been okay. I think that would have been fine, right? I think that would have been fine, better than this. But they're back in London, even though London is supposed to be pretty far away from the village, but it seems like they got there instantly. But while 6 is waving to one of the guys and he's leaving, he's going away, one of the doors opens up and it makes the sounds like it's a door from the village. So it's I don't know. Did they really leave the island? Is this really in 6's head? I don't know. But it's very, unsatisfying. That's probably the nicest way I can put it, is that this is very unsatisfying. Briefly, I'm going to talk about the 2009 TV show. I found bad quality versions of this on YouTube, so you can do that if you want. I would suggest just skipping it. It's god awful. They have Ian McKellen as number 2 in that show, and there's only one number 2 in that show. So I think that was kind of the main draw. And yeah, it's ultimately, it's just more of the same, where here are a bunch of questions. We're not really going to answer them. And they only had 6 episodes, but it's just really crappy, and there are just too many characters as well, where it's like, there's not really enough continuity in the first show, but there's way too much here, where it's like, here's a bunch of little characters, and yes, they all have arcs and their own little lives and all this crap, and it's like, here's a bunch of people you don't care about, and it is just terrible. But this is a village where it's just like, in your mind, man. Dumb. Lots of long, drawn-out scenes that do nothing. It's very boring. It's a very, very boring show, where it feels like Six does so little in this show. He does like so little in this show, and then it's just over. So there's that. The comics. There's The Prisoner's Shattered Visage, 1988. This was an authorized sequel to the show. This is about 20 years since number 6 has resigned and he is still on the island. There was this book published called The Village Idiot, seemingly by the number 2 who was resurrected, who was a part of the finale. And it's about this woman who ends up on the island, and she meets 6 there and this 2. And there's some more stuff going on. Mrs. Butterworth is actually in there for just a moment, but I like that. I like that she was there. There are apparently like missiles on the island, and it gets blown up by the end. And yeah, there's that. It's ultimately, it's okay. It doesn't really answer any questions, not really, but it was pretty decent. It was something. The Uncertainty Machine, this came out in 2018. This is about an MI5 agent being labeled a traitor. He's on the run. He needs to find some girl, and the village might want her. This is ultimately just not very good, where it's just, this 6 figures out that they've been screwing with him, and he ends up betraying his people at the end, and he's now the new number 2 for the village. And it's just, it's whatever. So, I usually like to be more like, hey, this is a strong recommendation when I do these videos. Ultimately, I couldn't really do that here just because, I was really enjoying it at the start. I was really enjoying The Prisoner when I first started watching it. I'm like, wow, this is going to be such a strong recommendation. And that was like after I saw like 7 and 8, and I'm like, holy shit, this is so good. And then, it just, so check it out if you want, right? It's free. It's free on Tubi TV. So you might waste a little time, if you don't end up liking it. It's probably going to be a little bit before I have another media review. That's going to be something that's not books, but I should have a few books that I'm going to be reviewing coming out relatively soon. I should have one for Agion 7 and 8, probably like Tuesday and Wednesday. But that's it. Check it out. Let me know. Like, if you know what the hell that ending was, because I was reading a bunch of theories online about the ending too. It's like some of it was interesting, but still doesn't really answer anything, and it's too surreal for me. I don't like that. I like it grounded. I like it a little simple. I'm a little simple. And it was a bit too metaphysical and all that for me. Anyways, thanks for watching. White Pill Media out.
Here's 40 shillings on the drum to those who volunteer to come to list and fight the foe today. Over the hills and far away, o'er the hills and o'er the main, through Flanders, Portugal and Spain, King George commands and we obey. Over